Hello, hello, hi! Hello, welcome in, my lovelies. I don't think I actually have any pre-ramble to do. We're gonna get right into it with Chapter 7 of Book 2 of Redwall. And this time, I am not going to forget that I have a lovely other scene I can put up. Ta-da! Let's see here. I do have pre-ramble to do. I have my little blurb I wrote. Let me see. When we last left off, Matthias and Brother Methuselah had been delving into the secrets of Redwall. Though they recovered Martin the Warrior's shield, his sword remains missing. There we go. Bit of a cough tonight. I'll be trying to manage that as best I can with some water. Chapter 7. Constance stood on the ramparts. She leaned over the parapet, watching as a young fox approached along the dusty road, bearing a stick with a white rag of truce tied to it. The big badger was uneasy. She knew this one, a fox from old Sela's brood. You needed eyes in the back of your head to watch that lot. "Stop right there and state your business, fox," Constance called gruffly. Chickenhound sniggered, but seeing the badger's stern expression, he quickly took control of himself. "I want to see your abbot," he called. The reply was abrupt. "Well, you can't." The fox waved his flag, squinting up at Constance. "But I must see the abbot. I come in peace. I have important information for sale." The badger was unmoved. "I don't care if you've got the rumbling foxtrot. You aren't getting inside this abbey. If you want to speak to anyone, then speak to me." Constance watched the crestfallen fox, then added as an afterthought, "And if you don't like it, well, you can sling your brush back up the road." Chickenhound was dismayed. This last insult had taken the wind completely out of his sails. He tried to think how Sela would have handled a situation like this. Eventually, he unrolled the bark scroll and waved it up at Constance. "This message is for the abbot's eyes only. It's important." The badger eyed him coldly. "Then chuck it up here. I'll see that he gets it." No amount of wheedling and blandishment would cause the cynical badger to change her mind. She was adamant. In the end, Chickenhound had to throw the scroll up. He made several puny attempts, each one weaker than the last. As the scroll fell back down into the road yet again, Constance called aloud, "Put some energy into it, you little milksop. I'm not hanging about here all day." Chickenhound heaved the scroll with all his strength. He was gratified to see Constance lean out and catch it. Hopefully, he called, "I'll wait right here for an answer." The badger grunted non-committally. She sat down below the parapet out of sight of the fox and scanned the message. Constance stayed where she was until a reasonable time elapsed, then stood up, panting heavily for effect. "Tell Sela that the abbot will see her 2 days from tonight at 10 o'clock in Mossflower Wood. She must come to the old tree stump, and mind you tell her, no tricks." Chickenhound waved the flag. He went into a bout of uncontrollable sniggering. "Right, I've got the message, fat one. Be sure your abbot brings lots of valuables with him. Goodbye, old grayback." Constance poked an angry snout down at the insulting fox. "You'd better get running, frog-face. I'm coming down there to put my paw behind you right now." Again, Constance dropped behind the parapet. She hammered her paws loudly against the stones. Standing up, she watched the terrified Chickenhound racing off down the road in a cloud of dust. "Snotty-nosed little upstart," she muttered. There was no need for the Father Abbot to concern himself with the underhand dealings of traitor foxes. Constance would be well able to deal with the situation herself. Matthias was famished. He sat down and took his lunch with Mr. and Mrs. Squirrel, the Vole family, Silent Sam, and Basil the garrulous hare. The young mouse ate mechanically. He did not really want conversation. This latest discovery of a new and baffling rhyme concerning moonlight, the north, and an unknown threshold nagged at his brain. Methuselah had gone off to seek the solitude of his gatehouse study, where he claimed he could think more clearly. Matthias was not the liveliest of table companions. He smiled and nodded, paying little attention to the chatter of the voles and squirrels. He was not even distracted by Silent Sam, who sat upon his knee, stroking his whiskers with a sticky paw. Basil Staghare eyed the food which Matthias had hardly touched. "Beg pardon, young mouse, old chap, but if you can't finish that blackberry muffin or that red currant tart..." Matthias absently pushed his plate across to the hare. Basil needed no second bidding. Abbot Mortimer entered. Seeing the look on Matthias's face, he leaned across and murmured in his ear, "All work and no play makes Matthias a dull mouse. Cheer up, my son." "What? Sorry, Father Abbot. I didn't mean to be rude. I was trying to solve a problem, you see." The abbot patted Matthias indulgently. "I understand, my son. Methuselah has told me of some of the difficulties facing you both. My advice is, don't let it get on top of you. Relax a little. Time provides all the answers. You've done splendidly so far, Matthias. Meanwhile, you must not forget your manners at table with the guests of our abbey. Matthias snapped out of his reverie. Silent Sam was admiring his sword belt. He laughed. Do you like that, Sam? It's the sword belt of a famous warrior. The little squirrel leaped upon the table. He darted up and down, thrusting out his paws as if he held a sword in it, stabbing away at thin air. He pointed at Matthias. The young mouse gave him a hug. No, bless you, Sam. I haven't got a sword of my own yet, but I will someday. Silent Sam pointed to himself, cocking his head on one side. Matthias prodded his fat little stomach. A sword for you too, Sam? Well, I don't know about that. Your mom and dad might not want you going about armed to the teeth. Basil Stag Hare had the answer. He produced a beautifully made knife. It was very small, encased in a cunningly crafted willow bark sheath. The hare beckoned Sam. Come here, you dreadful little rogue. I've got the very thing for you. This is a leveret dagger. All young hares carry one. Here, let's try it on you for a size, young buccaneer. What? Basil picked up a worn and discarded sandal. He undid the footstrap, threading the dagger and sheath along the strap. He fastened it around Sam's waist. There, by the left, you look a regular little swashbuckler now, chuckled the kindly hare. Bounding up and down with delight, Silent Sam cut a comical figure as he fenced his way along the tabletop, thrusting and parrying at cruets and candlesticks with his new sword, and sucking furiously on his free paw. Matthias joined in the laughter as Mr. and Mrs. Squirrel thanked Basil for the generous gift to their tiny offspring. Forgetting his immediate problems, Matthias passed a happy hour in the company of the friendly woodlanders. He enjoyed it even more when Cornflower appeared. She shared Matthias's seat, glad to be off her feet for a while. Basil nudged Matthias. Excellent little filly, that girl. You know, she can produce more tuck in the twinkling of an eye than you could shake a stick at. Mark my words, young feller, my mouse. A body would be lucky to settle down with her. I say, have you noticed the way she looks at you? Hines looks at a stag like that. Hines look at stags like that. Noble creatures, stags. It strikes me that you could be just the stag for her. Why, I remember when I was only a young lance-jack. Cornflower was making such faces that Matthias was about to silence Basil when Methuselah popped in at the door. He beckoned urgently to Matthias. Hastily, the young mouse excused himself and left. Basil leaned closer to Cornflower. He smiled roguishly. You didn't know I was a lance-jack, did you, my dear? Ah, those were the days of the old 47th Hare Border Rangers. That was the first time I ever clapped eyes on a stag. I say, I'm not boring you, am I? Nod's as good as a wink to old bachelor Basil, you know? Methuselah was in a ferment of eagerness as he led his young friend over to the gatehouse. Matthias, I found out where the threshold is. The ancient mouse refused to say more until they were safely inside his gatehouse study with the door firmly shut. Even then, he said nothing that made any real sense, shoving Matthias to one side as he delved through old parchments and manuscripts, scattering books left and right. Where is it? I had it not 5 minutes ago. Hello, what's this? Oh, the treatise on Bee-folk of Redwall. Methuselah hurled the dusty volume to one side, narrowly missing his companion. Wait a tick. I think I may have put it down over there. Matthias gazed in bewilderment at the over-cluttered study. Books, scrolls, and manuscripts littered the small room. In his excitement, Methuselah opened a desk and practically disappeared under an avalanche of paperwork. Hey, steady on, old mouse. What are you up to? Cried Matthias. Excuse me. Methuselah emerged jubilant, clutching a yellowed book. Eureka! This is it, the Sister Germain's literal translation of Martin the Warrior's Abbey blueprints. He flicked swiftly through the dusty pages of the aged volume. Let's see. Gardens, cloisters, bell towers... here it is, the Great Wall and its gates. The old mouse winked at Matthias gleefully as he adjusted his glasses. Listen to this. On the west wall will be situated a main gate so that creatures may come and go, obtaining entrance to or exit from the Abbey of Redwall. This entrance will be guarded both day and night, for it is the main gatehouse, and as such is the very threshold of our abbey. The two mice hugged each other. They danced around amid the chaos of paper, chanting with joy. The gatehouse is the threshold! The gatehouse is the threshold! The abbot, who was passing by, heard the noise. He shook his head at Ambrose Spike, who was coming from the opposite direction. Mayhaps they've been at the October Hale a little too much, Father Abbot, said the hedgehog. The abbot chuckled at the idea. Well, if it helps them on their mission of discovery, Ambrose, perhaps they ought to drink some more, eh? Aye, Ambrose agreed. 'Tis enough to inspire any creature, good October ale. Perhaps it might inspire you one day to make me keeper of the cellar keys, Father. Inside the gatehouse study, the two companions were once more at work, trying to break the code of the Great Hall rhyme. Well, that's another piece of the puzzle in place, said Methuselah, but we've jumped ahead of ourselves a bit. There are 4 lines before that to crack. Look for the sword in moonlight streaming forth, at night when day's first hour reflects the north. Matthias interrupted. Those first 2 lines sound as if they could only be solved in darkness. Look for the sword and moonlight streaming forth. I agree, replied Methuselah, but the next line is of vital importance. It tells exactly when to look. At night when day's first hour. Matthias mused. Let's look at this logically. Go through it word by word. Slowly they repeated the line together. At night, when day's first hour. Methuselah slumped in his armchair. I'm afraid it doesn't mean anything to me. Wait, cried Matthias. Midnight is the last hour of the old day, so by the same token, 1 o'clock in the morning is the first hour of the new day. But we still tend to class it as nighttime. It is as the rhyme says, at night when day's first hour. I believe you are right, said the old mouse. Day's first hour is not when it becomes light. It's 1 in the morning, still dark. Matthias leaned wearily against a stack of books. But if the gatehouse is the threshold, where are we supposed to stand to see anything an hour after midnight? That's easy, grinned Methuselah. The rhyme says, from o'er the threshold seek and you will see. It's simple. What is above our heads right now? Matthias shrugged. The wall, I suppose. Methuselah banged his paw down on the arm of the chair. Exactly! And where is the only place you can stand on a wall but on top of it? Suddenly it became clear to Matthias. Oh, I see, he cried. From o'er the threshold means that we must stand on the wall directly above the gatehouse. As fast as they could run, both mice hurried up the steps to the top of the wall. With Matthias in the lead, they pounded along the ramparts. Matthias stopped above the gatehouse and stamped his foot upon the stones. I'd say about here, wouldn't you agree? Methuselah looked a trifle doubtful. It looks to be a very rough approximation. Matthias had to concede. He looked sheepishly about. The stones where they stood were no different from any other part of the wall. The trail seemed to have gone cold again. Dejectedly, Matthias sat down on a heap of rock and rubble that had been there since the invasion. What are we supposed to do now? Hang about up here until after midnight and wait for a miracle? The old gatehousekeeper raised an admonitory paw. Patience, young one, patience. Let us take stock and review the facts. Lend me your knife for a moment. Matthias drew Shadow's dagger from his belt and gave it to his friend. He sat watching as the old mouse began writing in the dust from the rubble. Item 1. Martin is Matthias. Item 2. We have found Martin's tomb. Item 3. We have also found his shield and sword belt. Item 4. Our task is to find Martin's sword. Item 5. Where? From here, the top of the great gatehouse wall. Item 6. When? At 1 in the morning when moonlight streams forth. Item 7. In which direction? To the north. They sat in silence, digesting the facts on the list. Then Matthias spoke. Suppose we look to the north. Both mice turned their heads northwards. Well, what do you see, young one? Queried Methuselah. Matthias's voice was tinged with disappointment. Only the abbey, part of the beehives, the north side of this wall, and the treetops beyond. What do your eyes see, old one? Exactly the same as yours do, though perhaps a bit dimmer. Don't give up hope, though. Let us keep looking. Maybe we'll see something. Just a moment. Oh, excuse me. The surveillance continued. Apart from retrieving his dagger, Matthias sat very still, peering northwards. Eventually, he had to give up, as his eyes were beginning to water and he was getting a crick in his neck. Methuselah had fallen asleep in the afternoon sun. Angrily, Matthias slammed his dagger point deep into the edge of the rubble heap. I told you it was a waste of time. Can't you stay awake for 5 minutes? Must you go to sleep on me? The old mouse awoke with a start. What's that? Oh, Matthias, there you are. Dear me, I must have dropped off for a moment. Sorry. It won't happen again. Matthias was not listening. He was digging in the rubble with his dagger. Methuselah watched him curiously. What in the name of goodness are you up to now? The rubble scattered as Matthias dug away madly. I think I've found what we're after. There's some sort of shape in the stone down here. The trouble is, there's too much rubbish on top of it. I think we need Formol's help again. Oh, goody. More of Formol. Formol and his team arrived panting, with Matthias running ahead. The moles collapsed on the rubble, breathing hard. Oh, goodness. Your only gotten bitty short legs us moles do, or you takes it you gentle mice needin' our help again. Help again. This time Matthias understood. Yes, please, Mr. Formol. Do you think that you and your team could possibly move this pile of rock and rubble? There's something we need to get at underneath it all. Formol spread his stubby paws wide. He smiled winningly. No soon is said and done, young'un. Word yum loiker shift into. Matthias shrugged. Oh, anywhere, I suppose, as long as it's not in our way. Formol spat on his paws and rubbed them together. All right, mateys, best dumpin' this lot where it comed from. The two mice had to jump aside smartly as the mole team took over. With much hurrying and awing, they waded busily in, bulldozing the enormous heap of rock and rubble off the top of the ramparts. It tipped downwards in earthy showers, back into the trench in the abbey grounds whence it had first come. Matthias watched admiringly. What splendid workers these moles are, Methuselah. As the hill dwindled, his friend heartily agreed. Indeed they are. Their skills and knowledge are passed on through families, you know. Earth, rock, shale, or root, they can handle it all. Do you know, it was the moles that dug the foundations for this very abbey. Four-Mole can claim direct descent from the mole who was in charge of the operation. In fact, it was Martin who bestowed the title Four-Mole upon his ancestor. As the mice conversed, the moles hurled the last of the rubble from the ramparts, then set about brushing the stones clean. Four-Mole tugged his nose in salute. Har weem dumb now, sirs, I'll bid ye good day. 10 seconds later, they were all gone. Moles aren't too fond of heights, observed Methuselah. Right, let's see what they've uncovered. It was a circle cut into the stone. On one side it was cut shallow, while at the opposite side it was carved deeply. The center was domed with 2 slots graven into either slope. At the apex of the dome was the letter M. Beneath it were carved 13 small circles, each with a smiling face upon it. Constance came rambling along the wall, checking on the road beneath. Hello there, you two. Are you staying up here all day? You'll miss afternoon tea if you don't hurry. There'll be precious little left with 3 squirrels, 3 voles, and basil stag hare as guests. Studying the carvings, Matthias waved absently at the badger. You carry on, Constance. We'll be down shortly. The badger's natural curiosity was aroused. She came over and stood between the 2 mice. After a cursory glance, she threw up her paws in mock despair. Oh no, not more puzzles and riddles. Methuselah gave her a severe stare over the top of his glasses. My dear Constance, kindly do not pour scorn on things you know nothing of. Leave it to those with specialized knowledge. Turning to Matthias, the old mouse continued. Yes, most interesting. These 13 small circles with smiling faces. What do you make of them? Matthias could only shake his head. He could not think what the circles might mean. Constance interrupted. What, do you mean those things? They're obviously the 13 full moons of the year. Methuselah was distinctly piqued. How do you know that? Explain yourself. Constance scoffed. Any badger worth its salt knows all about the moon. Do you want me to recite all its phases? I can, you know. Matthias was suddenly back on the track again. He counted along the moons, stopping at the 6th one. That one will be this month, June. When is the full moon due in June, Constance? It's tomorrow night, came the prompt reply. Why, is something supposed to happen then? Some magic or a miracle? Methuselah ignored the badger's attempt at levity. If we stand up here at 1 o'clock in the morning on the night of the full moon, we may be able to find the sword of Martin the Warrior, he said rather sternly. Constance scratched her muzzle. How are you going to manage that? Matthias ran his foot around the edge of the circle. We're not quite sure yet, but we are trying to figure it out. You see, it's all linked closely with the rhyme from the wall of the Great Hall, Martin's tomb, and the stuff we found in it. This sword belt, a shield, another rhyme on the back of a Constance interrupted. What type of shield? Oh, pretty much the standard kind used by warriors, Matthias replied. A round steel affair with hand and arm holds. The badger nodded knowingly and continued where Matthias had left off. Yes, I've seen that sort of thing before. Not much to look at. In fact, just the type of shield that would fit precisely into this circle. Can't you see the slots for the arm holds? But then again, if you looked at that carved circle, you'll notice that it is cut so that the shield would tilt, probably to reflect the moonlight. Both mice stared at the badger. There was awe and respect written upon their faces. Matthias shook her paw with great ceremony. Constance, wonderful badger, old friend, don't worry about afternoon tea. You just sit yourself down right there because I, personally, am going to bring you the largest, most delicious tea that has ever been served within the walls of this abbey. The warm, red stone ramparts rang to the echo of the 3 friends' delighted laughter. I think I have a stuck page here. Indeed I do, just one moment. Here we are. Just need a bit of water before I continue. Sorry about that. Here we go. Chapter 8. Clooney lay with his one good eye half open. From beneath its slitted lid he watched Seela the vixen. The sly old devil was definitely up to something. He was certain of it. Clooney had secretly questioned Fangburn about the conversation that had gone on between Seela and her son. There was no doubt about it. The foxes were trying to dupe the warlord. Excuse me. Ooh, that coughing fit was something awful. Where was I? Clooney had secretly questioned Fangburn. There was no doubt about it, the Fox were trying to dupe the warlord. Clooney had cursed Fangburn for 20 different kinds of an idiot. Fancy not being able to read and allowing Seela to write out a message. Imagine letting Chickenhound go free without first getting the scroll read. If he had been a little fitter, he would have personally slain his oafish captain. What even is an oafish? Oafish captain. But as it was, Clooney kept silent about it all. Even if Seela was playing a double game, he needed the Fox's healing powers to regain his health and strength. Meanwhile, Clooney the Scourge made his own counter-espionage moves. He allowed Seela to administer his wounds, but he secretly stopped taking the herbs and potions to help him sleep. Early next morning, Chickenhound returned. He carried a bag laden with medicinal ingredients. Clooney feigned sleep, but secretly he observed the Foxes closely. They nodded and winked at each other quite a bit. When they were reasonably sure he was asleep, the two held a hurried, whispered conversation. And though, unfortunately, he could not hear what they said, their behavior was secret enough to make Clooney sure he was right. They were planning a double cross. Clooney did not tell any of his officers of his suspicions. He kept everything to himself. This way, there could be no possible leak of secrets. Clooney was content to watch and wait, getting a little stronger each day. Then, after a while, he came up with a fiendishly simple idea. He ordered that the room be cleared. He wished to be alone so that he could rest. When he was quite sure that he would not be disturbed, Clooney took a quill and parchment from the bedside table. He drew a diagram, complete with pointing arrows, horde positions, lines of attack and defense, together with written instructions. It was a plan for the second full-scale invasion of Redwall Abbey. Clooney made it clear that the success of the attack depended solely on the battering ram breaking through the main gate. When he had finished writing, Clooney pushed the parchment under his pillow, taking care to leave just a small corner of it jutting out. His officers would be too slow and dull to notice it, a tiny scrap of parchment showing from beneath the pillow. Even if they should, they would attach no importance to it. But Seela the Fox would. Clooney settled down to wait. Redtooth and Fangburn returned with their captive guest an hour later. Clooney stretched himself luxuriously and yawned aloud. I had a nice peaceful nap without you three clattering about the room and creating a noise. How's that tree felling coming along? I think I gave him a gruffer voice than that. Redtooth leaned upon his spear. Shouldn't take much longer now, Chief. I've ordered some of them to get a good blaze going so that the trunk can be fired and hardened. Clooney flexed his injured tail slowly. Good. Make sure that all the large branches are cut off close to the trunk. It'll make it easier to carry. Now, Fox, how about changing these bandages and giving me something to make me sleep tonight? That stuff you gave me yesterday wasn't much use. I was tossing and turning for hours before I got any rest. Seela made a sweeping, servile curtsy. Now that my son has brought me new ingredients, I can certainly give you medicine to make you sleep, sir. I guarantee you'll go off like a bug in a blanket, if you'll pardon the expression, sir. Just as long as it gets me to sleep, said Clooney, smiling inwardly. That night, Clooney allowed Redtooth and Fangburn to guzzle their fill from a cask of barley wine that had been found in the church cellars. He gave Seela permission to drink also. Clooney watched as the Fox pretended to drink as much of the barley wine as the rat captains. While she was doing this, Clooney also pretended to take his sleeping medicine. Clooney and Seela continued with their pantomime, neither letting a drop pass their lips. It was late night. Clooney joined in the snores of his drunken officers. The room was comfortably warm. A lone candle flickered in its socket. Clooney felt the pillow move slightly. Seela was taking the bait. Clooney gave a big imitation snore and smacked his lips contentedly. Someday he must learn to play chess. He bet himself that he would be unbeatable. Clooney also made a wager with himself that the plans would be back safely tucked under the pillow by morning, and that Seela would have an accurate copy of them hidden away somewhere. Now he could catch a few hours' sleep. No doubt the mice would be interested to learn of his scheme to attack the main gate with a battering ram. They would strengthen the gatehouse and deploy the main body of defenders in the immediate area. Clooney could have laughed out loud. While they were defending the gate, he would be tunneling under the southwestern corner of the Abbey wall. Just a moment here. Chapter 9. This cough is fighting me. The deep, warm, brazen voice of the Joseph bell tolled across the tranquil meadows, its echoes fading in the leafy depths of Mossflower Wood. It was 11 o'clock on the night of the full moon. Inside Cavern Hole, the candles burned bright. Most of the woodland defenders and Redwall mice had retired to their beds. Those who preferred to stay awake were gathered by invitation of Matthias and Methuselah to a party supper. All who attended wished them well on their quest. Abbot Mortimer took the floor. My friends, Redwall mice, and honored guests, we are gathered here tonight, not only to pay tribute, but to add our heartfelt good wishes to Matthias and brother Methuselah. May they have success and fortune in their venture this night, and may our abbey soon be enhanced by the restoration of the sword that belonged to Martin the warrior. The abbot took his seat among cries of "Hear, hear." There was much paw-shaking and fur-patting. Matthias felt deeply honored, but very impatient. The hourglass had to empty twice more before the crucial time he waited. He stole a sideways glance at his companion. Methuselah could hardly stop his eyelids from dropping. The hard work they had done, combined with the nervous tension, were beginning to tell upon the old gatehouse keeper. Matthias nudged him gently. Wake up, old one. If you're tired, I'll help you to your feet. Help you to your room. Constance and I can take the shield up to the threshold. You get a good night's sleep. We'll tell you all about it in the morning. Methuselah came wide awake with indignation. You'll do nothing of the sort, you young scallywag. I could give you a 10-second start and still beat you to the top of the wall. Do you want to see me try? Excuse me. Constance coughed and spluttered upon a candied chestnut. She roared with laughter. I wouldn't attempt it if I were you, Matthias. He's liable to beat you hollow in his present mood. The old mouse, seeing the humor of the situation, began to chuckle. And don't think I couldn't, you great stripy lump. Here, what do you say we put this young mouse up in the dormitory? It's way past his bedtime. You and I could go to the threshold together. Might have been a little loud to laugh. Not very good at laughing on command. Constance and Methuselah collapsed against each other, laughing helplessly. It was all Matthias could do to keep a straight face. He pretended to take offense at Methuselah's statement. Why, you old pair of relics, it would take me 2 ticks to bring you some warm milk and tuck you in your own beds, and then I'd be free to get on with the job myself. The 3 friends laughed until tears streamed down their cheeks. Methuselah held his sides as he spoke between gusts of merriment. I say, Constance, you old fogey. Matthias is a bit old for this sort of thing. Matthias had fallen off his chair. He waved his paws, pleading for the joking to stop as he rolled about on the floor, exploding from bouts of giggling to fits of laughter. Basil Staghair tutted severely as he remarked to Ambrose Spike, Dreadful table manners. Just look at those 3, kicking up a hullabaloo like that. Eating's a serious business. They haven't touched a bite of supper, you know. So I see, grunted the hedgehog. Here, you don't suppose they'd mind, do you? Not at all, dear fellow, said Basil regally, as he shared the contents of the 3 plates between himself and Ambrose. Saves it all going to waste, what? It was 15 minutes before 1 o'clock in the morning. 3 figures crossed the Abbey gardens as the moon broke from behind a drifting cloud bank. The nearby pond was bathed in a silvery sheen, parts of the sandstone wall reflecting back a wavery bluish light. Constance and Methuselah carried lanterns. Matthias bore the warrior's shield upon his arm. They ascended the wall steps in single file, acknowledging the murmured good wishes of those on sentry duty. Matthias had decided against trying the shield in its niche before the appointed hour. He felt somehow that they must abide by the rules of the verse, waiting until day's first hour on the night of the full moon. It just had to be so. No use tempting fickle Dame Fortune. Solemnly, the 3 friends gathered around the carving upon the ramparts. Matthias clutched the shield tightly, waiting for the stroke of 1. High above the small world of Redwall, the moon also waited, suspended in velvety space like a pale gold coin. It seemed that the minutes stretched into an eternity in which silence reigned over all. The great Joseph bell boomed out once. It's 1 o'clock. It was 1 o'clock, day's first hour. Slowly, reverently, Matthias lowered the shield of Martin down onto the stone circle that had been carved many long years before to receive it. The shield made a mild clanking sound as it was laid to rest in its niche. It fitted perfectly into the stone receptacle. All 3 creatures stood back a pace to see what might happen. Matthias was the first to cry out, Look! The shield is reflecting the moonlight back into the sky! Moonlight seemed to concentrate upon the highly polished steel dome in its designated position, sending an intense beam of white light back off into the night sky. Methuselah blinked, holding his paw across his eyebrows. He stared into space, trying to follow the path of the reflected moonlight. Truly it is a most beautiful, wondrous sight, he breathed. Alas, my old eyes are not what they were. All I see is a light shooting off into infinity. Wait, look at the abbey roof, Constance murmured. The beam cuts right across the top gable. I can see the weather vane as clearly as if it were day. Good heavens, Matthias squeaked. You're right! The Abbey weather vane. It's the one thing that's caught in the path of the light. The north! The north! Methuselah shouted. It's the weather vane arm that points north. That's where the sword must be. Solemnly, the three friends placed their paws on one on top of the other. At long last, the mystery was solved. They knew now where the sword of Martin the Warrior had been for countless years. On the arm of a weather vane pointing north. However, it was three rather disconsolate creatures that sat down to early breakfast after a few hours' fitful sleep. They had encountered a major problem. How to get the sword down? What a pity we haven't got about 30 or 40 extra long ladders that we could tie together to reach the roof, murmured Constance. Oh, do be quiet, Constance, Matthias grumbled. That must be the 10th time you said that in the last hour. Sorry, only trying to help, she mumbled. Methuselah pushed his porridge aside. There are only two ways you could help, my friend. One, by keeping silent. Two, by turning yourself into some creature that could climb all the way up to that roof. A bird or a squirrel or something. Sorry, Methuselah pushed his porridge aside. They sat and stared at Methuselah in amazement. A solution of stunning simplicity had been found. I do hope that Mrs. Squirrel hasn't decided to sleep in, said Matthias. She'll need an early start if she's going to make it back by lunchtime. Mrs. Squirrel, or Jess as she liked to be called, was only too pleased to oblige her friends from Redwall. Having been given full instructions by Matthias, Jess stood at the base of the immense Abbey building. The squirrel performed what looked like an intricate acrobatic dance, followed by several cartwheels at lightning speed. She's just limbering up, Mr. Squirrel explained to Matthias. A large crowd of mice and woodlanders had gathered to witness the epic ascent. Not even in the oldest recording writings was there any mention of a creature venturing to climb as high as the Abbey roof. It was a most formidable task, for the roof soared to nearly twice the height of the bell tower. Jess elbowed her way through the throng. She kissed Mr. Squirrel, patted her son Silent Sam upon the head, then shook paws with Constance, Matthias, and Methuselah. With a brisk, cheery manner, she scooped up a handful of soil, rubbing it into her paws to give some extra gripping power. Lovely day for a climb, she remarked offhandedly. Then away she went, paw over paw, up the massive Abbey face. The lower wall, with its arched sandstone window frames, held no difficulties for the tough squirrel. She climbed with speed and alacrity. Lifting herself over the gutter with a neat flick of her bushy tail, Jess clattered to a small slate side roof. She was temporarily lost to view at the start of the second stage. Excuse me. Whew. Let's see. She was temporarily lost to view at the start of the second stage. As she came into sight again, the watchers below could not help but notice that the climb was more difficult. Progress was slower. Mr. Squirrel cupped his paws and called up, "Are you all right up there, Jess?" Latching her tail around a projecting gargoyle, Jess shouted back, "Well, I'm making headway, my dear. This stone, though, it's a bit rough on the old paws and claws, not like good old wood or tree bark." Chins went up, heads tilted back. The crowd below followed the ascent of the plucky Jess Squirrel. By this time, she seemed to the watchers to be rapidly diminishing in size as she forged upwards. Formal, who was never too keen on heights, covered his eyes with a paw. Oh, good. "Gur, moy dearie me. She'm lookin' an owly bird all a ways up there. Nay, I'm afeard to look." Although Matthias had to agree with Formal, he continued looking upwards. Jess was reduced to a mere speck now. The young mouse gritted his teeth, willing the brave squirrel onwards. "Go on, Jess, you can do it. Not far to the gable now." The crowd fell silent. All that could be heard was Silent Sam sucking his tiny paw as he clutched onto his father's tail. Suddenly, Winifred the Otter broke the quiet. "Look! Jess has made it over the gutter! She's on the roof!" A mass cheer went up. The squirrel was on the last lap. Now she would have to call into play all of her climbing ability to keep going up the treacherously steep, smooth slates. Methuselah polished agitatedly at his spectacles. "Where is she now? Will someone please enlighten me?" "She's on top of the roof, walking with a foot either side of the apex towards the gable," yelled Abbot Mortimer. Methuselah sniffed. "No need to shout, Father Abbot. I'm only hard of sight, not hearing." Mr. Squirrel clapped his paws joyfully. "Oh, she's made it! My Jess has made it!" Amid the riot of jubilation, Matthias watched. The weather vane moved slightly, indicating that Jess, actually out upon the north pointer, must be trying to retrieve the sword. What a daring climb! What a courageous creature! Jess Squirrel would surely take her place in the annals of Redwall Abbey. Mr. Squirrel held Silent Sam up in his arms. "Look, Sam! Mom's done it! She's on the way back down now." Silent Sam clutched his little paws over his head. He shook them like a tiny champion. Nobody in all the world was a better climber than his mother. Matthias waited for a glimpse of the sword, but Jess was not halfway down when a shout of consternation arose from the crowd below. "Look out! She's being attacked by sparrows!" Sure enough, the fierce birds were whirling in close to the intrepid Jess. They tried to peck at her, seeking to dislodge her or distract her enough to make her fall. It was a fearsome, sickening drop should she lose her grip. Matthias took command. He acted swiftly. "Hurry! Get the 6 best field and harvest mouse archers. Those birds have got to be stopped immediately." The angry sparrows persisted with their savage assault. Jess kept on descending resolutely. She couldn't seem to defend herself. The abbot and Constance had to leap forward to restrain Silent Sam. He had left his father and was trying to scramble up the base of the abbey wall with a small dagger clenched in his teeth. Constance attempted to restrain Sam. "Stay clear, little one, you'll only distract your mum. Look, she's doing splendidly, an old bunch of sparrows can't bother her. Stand back now, here come the bow mice." Speedily notching shafts to their strings, the archers angled their bows upwards. "Do not aim to kill any of the birds," the abbot cried. "Shoot to frighten them off." "Shoot," Matthias yelled. The first volley of arrows was launched. They fell short of the sparrows. Jess carried on scrambling downwards, beating off attackers whenever she had a free paw. "They're getting within range now," shouted Matthias. "Aim, fire." The mouse archers sent off a hail of arrows that came close enough to cause a scatter among the sparrows. Taking advantage of their brief confusion, Jess clambered down onto the small side roof. The tenacious birds regrouped and came at her again. Below, the bow mice stood ready. "She'll make it down," Ambrose Spike yelled. "One more good volley should scare them off." "Ready? Fire!" called Matthias. The deadly shafts hissed upwards, causing a mad flurry among the attackers. Purely by accident, a stray arrow struck one young sparrow. It came tumbling down the slope of the small roof, dropping to earth like a stone, the arrow sticking in its leg just above the knee joint. Cheated of their intended victim, the sparrows flew off, chirping bad-temperedly. Constance snatched up a woven rush washing blanket. Holding the small sparrow firmly with her paw, she gripped the arrow in her teeth and yanked it clear from the bird's leg. The badger then upended the basket, imprisoning the maddened sparrow underneath. Shouts of joy mingled with relief greeted Jess Squirrel as she dropped wearily to the grass. "Whew," she gasped. "What a wild bunch of savages those sparrows are. I thought they had me once or twice back there." Before the heroic squirrel could be united with her family, Matthias came dashing across. "Jess! Where is the sword?" he panted. The squirrel shrugged and shook her head. "It wasn't there, Matthias. I climbed out along the north pointer and actually saw the shape of the sword in the holder where it was supposed to rest. There were even some loose, rusty wires that may have held it in position at one time or another. But there was definitely no sword. I'm sorry, Matthias. I tried my best." "Of course you did, Jess," said Matthias, hiding his disappointment. "Thank you very much for your valiant efforts." Half an hour later, the crowd had dispersed and gone about their business. Matthias sat with his back against the abbey wall, his mind in a turmoil. All that hard work, solving the clues, burning midnight oil, endangering the lives of his friends. It had all come to nothing. He beat his paws against the stones of the abbey, a tear of frustration gleaming in his eye. "Why, Martin, why?" he moaned. The captive sparrow fluttered her wings against the upturned basket. "I kill you!" she chattered angrily at Matthias. "I kill mouse! Let Warbeak free, you dirty worm!" Matthias peered through the cracks at the insulting prisoner. "Oh, shut your beak, you little monster," he muttered. "You're in no position to kill anyone." The sparrow's venomous temper increased. "King Bullspara, he kill you! Make dead quick fast!" Matthias laughed mirthlessly. "Will he indeed? Well, you tell King Thingummy, if you should bump into him again, that you've met Matthias the warrior, and I don't kill that easily, my bad-tempered little friend." This last statement set the young sparrow off into a veritable dance of rage. "Mouse no friend of Warbeak! Killy it!" Matthias tapped the basket with his foot. "Listen, Warbeak, if that's your name. You'd better improve your temper, or you'll find yourself without food to eat or any medical attention. So if I were you, I'd sit quietly for a while and think about that." Matthias spun on his heel and marched off, the enemy sparrow's chirp still ringing in his ears. "No want of food, no need attention. Warbeak sparrow, all brave, kill it." Matthias sighed wearily. There was just no talking to some creatures. Excuse me for a moment, I need a drink. Whew. Always good to have some water. Chapter 10. Seal of the Fox continued to complain. She must have a certain type of herb that was not in her kit. It could only be found in mossflower wood at the dark of night. Clooney listened to the fox's pleas, knowing that they were merely an excuse to gain her freedom. He paused as if to deliberate, watching the hopeful expression on Sela's face. I can see that you need this herb. So why don't you send your son Chickenhound to get it? Sela was never stuck for a ready answer. No, I'm afraid that's useless, sir. He's too young and inexperienced. Chickenhound wouldn't know where to start looking. Clooney nodded sympathetically. You're probably right. I suppose I'll have to stretch a point. You can go off to the woods to search for this vital herb. But be warned, Fox. There will be 2 rats with you all the time. One false move, and I'll have that bushy tail of yours to trim the collar of my war cloak. Is that understood? Sela's head bobbed vigorously. Of course, sir. What reason would I have to play you false? I'm looking forward to a good share of the plunder once I feel you and Redwall is conquered. The huge tail snaked out and caressed the fox. Of course you are, my friend. How silly of me. Clooney actually smiled. Sela shuddered. That evening, Sela left the church, accompanied by Redtooth and Fangburn. Secretly, she could have danced with delight. Only 2 guards. With her knowledge of Mossflower, Sela could quite easily give them the slip for 15 minutes or so. Back is starting to hurt. Back at the church, Clooney had risen from his bed. He attempted an exploratory walk, leaning on his banner as he stumped gingerly around the room. Good. In a short while, he would be back to his old self again. Clooney spoke aloud to the picture of Martin, bound to his standard. That fox should easily give those idiots of mine the slip. Then she can deliver my false plans to your abbot. It's all going along quite smoothly. Bit of a blow for your side, eh, mouse? Twilight tinged Mossflower Wood. Sela sniffed the breeze. She glanced up at the sky. It would soon be dark, and she could keep her rendezvous with the mouse abbot at the old stump. Redtooth and Fangburn were both unhappy and uncomfortable. For the last hour, Sela had led them through stinging nettles, swarms of midges, and marshy ground. They blundered along, hacking at the undergrowth with cutlass and spear. I think we must be somewhere near the mouse abbey, Fangburn said. Stow the gab! Keep your eyes on the fox, Redtooth snarled. I wish I'd brought some lancers along with us, Fangburn whined. Redtooth's already dangerously thin patience snapped. He grabbed hold of his sniveling crony and started shaking him. Listen, thickhead, if you don't stop your moaning, I'll chop your tongue out with my cutlass, do you hear me? Fangburn struggled free. Angrily, he jabbed at Redtooth with the spear. You dare try anything with that blunt old bread knife, and I'll spear your gizzard before you can blink an eye. Oh, you will you? Yes, I will, smarty rat. Then take that, big mouth. Ouch! Punch me, would you? I'll soon show you. Together the rats crashed into a prickly bush, kicking, biting, and pummeling each other. Claws, tails, and teeth came into play. They went at it hammer and tongs for several minutes until Redtooth emerged the victor. His nose was bleeding and he had lost a tooth, but he was in better shape than his opponent. Fangburn crawled miserably out of the wrecked bush. Both eyes were blacked, a chunk of his left ear was missing, and his whole body was covered in long, raking claw marks and prickles. He bent painfully to retrieve his spear. Seizing the opportunity, Redtooth landed him a mighty kick on the bottom. His nose plowed up a furrow of soil. Panting furiously, Redtooth berated Fangburn. You half-witted fool! Now see what you've done! While you were busy assaulting a superior officer, you let the fox escape! Fangburn sat up. He winced through discolored eyes. I let the fox escape? Me? Oh no, you're the one in charge. You let her get away, not me. Wait till I report this to Clooney. I'll tell him that you— Will you shut up? Redtooth yelled. It's no use us standing here arguing. We'd better get searching for the fox. I'll go this way, and you go that way. The first one to find her keeps shouting until the other arrives. Have you got that? Now get moving. The 2 rats stumbled off through the woods in different directions. Meanwhile, in another part of Mossflower Wood, Sela sneaked along looking from left to right. There was the 3-topped oak, there was the abbey wall. Ah, here it was. The old stump. The moonlight illuminated the scene clearly. She was alone. Where was the mouse abbot? A heavy paw clamped itself around Sela's neck from behind. Her tongue shot out. Struggling uselessly, she gagged and choked. Constance's gruff voice growled into her ear. Be still, fox, or I'll snap your neck like a dead twig. Sela froze. There was nothing more dangerous than a fully grown badger. Their strength and ferocity were renowned. Constance's free paw snapped the herb pouch from the fox's belt. She shook the contents out onto the stump. Grabbing the copy of Clooney's invasion plan, she studied it briefly, then stuffed it into her belt. Your abbot was supposed to meet me with a reward, Sela whispered. The badger's eyes blazed with contempt as she spun the vixen around. Here's your reward, traitor. Whump. Constance dealt Seela a sharp blow between the ears. The fox fell in a senseless heap. Constance ducked behind a tree and called out in a high-pitched voice, "Over here! I've got the fox! Quick, over here!" Redtooth was first to arrive. He came dashing through the bushes and halted at the sight of the unconscious fox among the ferns. "Hell's tooth, Fox! Where's Fangburn? What the devil do you mean slinking off like that? Get up on your feet and answer me." Constance emerged from behind the tree. "I don't think she'll wake up for a while yet. Fancy meeting you here, rat." Redtooth got over his surprise quickly. Seeing the badger unarmed, he swished his cutlass through the air and smiled menacingly. "Well, well, it's a friend of the mice. So we meet again, Badger." Constance stood tall, her huge paws unfolded. Or, her huge paws folded, sorry. "Redtooth, isn't it? I see you still remember me from your defeat at the wall. I told you then we had a score to settle." Redtooth bared his teeth and snarled. "I'm going to enjoy this, Badger. I'll make sure you die slowly." The rat leaped at Constance, swinging his cutlass expertly. For a heavy badger, his adversary moved lightly and skillfully. Neatly sidestepping a cutlass thrust, she cuffed the rat smartly on the point of the nose. Stung into retaliation, Redtooth charged Constance with the point of his blade. A fierce kick in the ribs and a swift chop to the claw sent the rat and the cutlass in opposite directions. Redtooth lay winded upon the ground. Constance leaned over him. "Get up and retrieve your weapon," the badger growled. As Redtooth stood, he grabbed a handful of earth and flung it into Constance's eyes. The big badger staggered back, rubbing at the grit which clogged her vision. Excuse me. Oh, apologies, let's see. Rubbing the grit which clogged her vision. The rat picked up the cutlass and swung it, slashing wildly at his enemy's thick fur. He scored several hits. Suddenly, panic gripped him. The wounded badger had seized the blade, regardless of its keen edge. Constance pulled Redtooth in close. She gave a sideways push, snapping the cutlass blade in two pieces. Kicking the rat over on his back, she flung the broken blade away and grabbed the rodent's tail tightly with both paws. Redtooth screamed in terror as he felt himself leave the ground to go spinning aloft over the badger's head. With his tail pulled taut and the wind whistling through his fangs, Redtooth howled as the trees went by in a green blur. Like an athlete throwing the hammer, Constance whirled on her hind legs faster and faster, until suddenly she threw her burden with a colossal heave. Redtooth would have flown a record distance had there not been a stout sycamore tree several yards away. Ignoring her injuries, Constance called into the surrounding woods, "Over here! He's over here!" Then she limped swiftly in the direction of Redwall with the captured plans. Only moments later, Fangburn came blundering through the ferns. He tripped upon the groaning fox who was just coming round. "Here, what's happened? Where's Redtooth?" he asked anxiously. Seela sat up, rubbing her head, trying to recognize her surroundings. She saw the old stump littered with her herbs and potions. The pouch lay nearby. Holding her head with both paws, she tried to halt the thumping ache. Damn that badger's hide! She'd taken the plants from Seela as if she were confiscating acorns from a baby mouse. So much for the rich rewards. Fangburn prodded Seela with the spear. "Hey, you! Pay attention! I asked you where Redtooth is." Seela probed a loosened tooth with her tongue. "Leave me alone. How should I know?" Fangburn persisted. "Now listen, Fox. I want to know what's been going on here. I'm sure I heard Redtooth calling out. Hell's whiskers, wait until Clooney gets to hear about this." Seela pointed a shaky paw. "There's your rat, by that big sycamore yonder." "Huh. Looks like he's had a spot of bother, too." Fangburn touched Redtooth with his foot. He's dead! Look, the sword's been broken in two." The fox and the rat stood looking at each other, their thoughts running on parallel lines. It was fairly obvious what must be done if they were to save their skins. "Right," said Seela. "We'd better work out a good story to tell Clooney when we get back. He's not stupid, so we'd better get it right." The unlucky pair stumbled off through the nighttime woodlands, gesticulating and muttering together, weaving a fabric of lies that they hoped would satisfy Clooney the Scourge. We're coming up on an hour here. Let me see how long this next chapter is. I can get through this next chapter. In just a moment, let me get some water. Apologies. Oh. Chapter 11. Once again, the abbot's room was the scene of a late repast. The news that Constance had brought showed without a doubt that Cluny would soon be on the attack again. Abbot Mortimer was the first to admit that he had been mistaken. The intelligence brought to us by our friend Constance is conclusive. Cluny will never rest until he has Redwall under his heel. Therefore, I feel that I must apologize for my misjudgment of the situation. You, my commanders, were right, and now, thanks to Cluny, we know the secret details of the enemy horde's next attack. The abbot slapped a paw down on the plans. It is all here, but as I have said before, I will not concern myself with the fighting of a war. It is my task to heal the injured and give sustenance to the defenders. It is the duty of you, my generals, to plan the repulse of this invasion. Matthias held up a paw. Father Abbot, it is our duty not only to defend, but to retaliate. There was a strong murmur of agreement from around the table. The abbot bowed and placed his paws within his wide habit sleeves. So be it, he said with great solemnity. I leave the salvation of Redwall to you, my commanders. The abbot bowed once more, then retired for the night, leaving Matthias, Constance, Winifred, Formal, and Ambrose Spike. The meeting continued. They were joined by Basil Staghair and Jess Squirrel. Methuselah also attended to act as mediator and counselor, approving some ideas while discouraging others, calming the hothead and encouraging the timid. Much good sense was talked, and the tone of the meeting was that of creatures who were determined to win at all costs. The discussion, running on sensible lines, went on until it was nearly dawn. It was a confident and satisfied group of friends who shook paws as the meeting ended. Basil insisted on taking Constance to the infirmary to have her wounds treated. The Badger tried to shrug him off. Pah! Such a fuss over a few minor scratches, she grumbled. The hare chuckled admiringly. A few minor scratches? Will you listen to the heroine? Why, my dear Badger, those are honorable wounds gained on the field of combat. I say, Jess, lend a paw here. Have you seen the dreadful gashes that friend Constance has collected? By the left, old girl, you should be hors de combat. H-O-R-S-D, as in hors d'oeuvres? Have you seen the dreadful... No, wait, hang on. By the left, old girl, hors de combat. Not even a stag could put up with slashes like that. Come on now, let's have you. There's a sensible girl. Constance was led off muttering by Basil and Jess. All the rest retired to their beds, with the exception of Matthias and Methuselah. They strolled round the cloisters, savoring the peace of the midnight hours. You know, old one, I can't help thinking that a victory would be assured if only we had the warrior's sword, Matthias said. Methuselah nodded wistful agreement. Indeed it would. But alas, for all our efforts, the trail is as cold as a midwinter night. I'm afraid we must resign ourselves to the fact that the sword is lost or hidden somewhere forever. The old gatehousekeeper leaned upon the young mouse's arm as they walked along, talking of this and that. Eventually, the conversation came around to the sparrow's attack upon Jess. Methuselah shook a warning paw. Extremely dangerous birds, sparrows. Very warlike and quarrelsome. Luckily, they keep to themselves and will only attack if their territory is intruded upon, as you saw today. By the way, did you see that young one who was brought down by the archers? I certainly did, Matthias replied. Constance has got the bad-tempered little wretch imprisoned under a wash-basket. What a nasty young villain. The arrow only scratched her, really. It was shock more than anything else that brought her down. Says her name is Warbeak. Methuselah was taken aback. Do you mean to tell me you've talked with her? Remarkable. The sparrow language, or Spara as it is called, is very difficult to comprehend. Oh, I don't know, Matthias said casually. I don't find it too hard, and at least the little hooligan seems to understand what I'm saying to her. Methuselah's curiosity was aroused. And what has she been saying to you, this Warbeak? Pretty much what you'd expect, Matthias replied. Either she, or the leader King Bull Spara, is going to kill me. Evidently, she looks on anything that can't fly as an enemy. They strayed over by the gatehouse. The old mouse invited Matthias in for a late nightcap. Methuselah appeared very interested in sparrows. He leafed through his record books. Let me see. Summers of the Big Drought. Winter of the Deep Drifts. Yes, I thought I'd find it here. Do you remember I told you of a sparrowhawk whom I treated about 4 years back? Well, here is my report, some small notes I made at the time. This hawk talked of the sparrows. She called them winged mice, though for the life of me I cannot see any comparison between highly civilized mouse and those primitive savages. Point was, though, this sparrowhawk said she'd been told that the sparrows once stole an object of great value to our abbey. She didn't say what it was. I thought the bird was merely trying to impress me with idle gossip. I should have questioned her further. We may have found out just what that object was. Matthias looked pensive. Do you think it could have been the sword? The old mouse sat tapping his paw upon the record book. It could have been, Matthias. It could have been. You see, the sparrows never communicate or bother with us. They never fly into our abbey. But up on the roof, well, that's a different matter. They consider it to be their territory. As I see it, the sword was the only object of value we had up there, although we did not know it at the time. So who else but another bird would know that the sparrows had stolen it? By the whiskers, old one, Matthias said excitedly. I think you've hit the nail on the head. Do you think that our bad-tempered captive might know something about the rumor? Methuselah grinned mischievously. Lend me your dagger. I have a simple experiment that I wish to try on our prisoner. Come on. Matthias escorted his friend to where the basket lay by the abbey walls. There was no sound from within. Methuselah tapped the basket sharply with the blade of the dagger. Warbeak had been caught napping. She came to life in an irate mood. Worms! All worms, you old mouseworm! Stay away! Warbeak killy! Methuselah tried his level best to act tough. Be silent, you little baggage, or I'll spike you on this dagger, and your king too if he dares to come down. In a fury, Warbeak smashed her small body against the sides of the basket, causing the old mouse to take a step back. Ha! Go on, you killy, Warbeak with dagger. Wait, see. If you not get King Bull Sparrow with a little worm knife. King have a big sword. Chop all mouses up. Killy pretty quick, you betcha. Methuselah laughed with delight. You see? The Sparrow King owns a big sword. Matthias did a cartwheel. He whooped with joy. Methuselah, you're a magician, an ancient wizard. The old mouse shook his head modestly. Oh dear me, now, I like to think of myself as an aged but extremely erudite scholar. And that is where we'll leave it off for the night. Just over an hour. Going into chapter 12. Oh, we'll end things off quickly here. Oh, I may need to lay down soon. My back is hurting something fierce. As always, I have been your host for the evening, Enigma Emerald Evergreen, wishing you a happy night and a happy life. Thank you very much for listening.